Okay, the first thing that you see up here, you come up through the avenues, and then you see owls. And you're going to hear this a lot. This is the largest collection of Pueblo owls in the world. These are from Cochiti Pueblo. These are from Santa Clara. These are some prehistorics down here. And then there's some from Casa Grande, which is not technically a Pueblo. Now, who said they knew a little bit about Pueblo pottery?
A little bit.
Okay, well that's okay. A little bit is better than nada. Okay, so explain to folks where the Pueblos are.
Well, I mean, not most. There's a lot in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, I believe. No, those are the two main areas.
Yeah, you got the two right. There's 19 Pueblos that are left out of what was way more than 100 that were in existence in the 1300s. Most of the Pueblos died out before the Spanish even showed up. Before Coronado came hoofing it, looking for the cities of gold. Part of the reason was because they killed each other off through warfare. And part of the reason was because the Spanish diseases came ahead of the conquistadors. So the Indians themselves had trade networks, and traders would catch a cold in Mexico City and then walk up to Arizona to trade with the Hopi, and they brought those diseases with them. And so a lot of people died. But anyway, today there are 19 Pueblos still in existence, and I have pottery from all 19, and then I also have pottery from most of the 100 that died out. So these owls are the beginning of the process, and as you walk here into the main room, there's a lot more owls.
Do you know how many you have in total?
It's over 500, but I lost count.
What was the significance of the owl?
The owls were used to keep enemies away. Particularly, the more recent owls were used for keeping the Navajo and the Apache away. They are Athabascans, and they came in the 1500s from southern Canada. And when they migrated in, they were very fierce, and they did a lot of attacking. And so the Pueblo people would put owls in their windows because with the Athabascans, they associated owls with death. So if a Dene person to this day has an owl fly over them, that freaks them out because the owls take them over the Spirit Mountains. So.
Are we allowed to take photos?
Yeah, you can leave your stuff over by Nikki on the top of the stairs. That way you're not having to hold it. Yeah.
So how many years have you collected this for? What did you say?
28.
28?
Yeah.
That's a lot in 28 years. I mean, this is amazing. I've been to like some museums like all over, and this is impressive.
So this is a larger collection than any museum in America.
Yeah.
And it constitutes at this point somewhere north of 12,000 pieces, but I don't count it.
No.
Okay, it just, every day more arrive, and this is the difference between Pueblo pottery and other pottery is that it's all hand built. So in other words, there's no mass manufacture. It's not like going to Hallmark where you can buy an ornament and then somebody 100 miles away can buy that same ornament. Some people in the Pueblo culture will repeat the same motif over and over again. Like if you look at some of these owls with the little owlets, some of them are quite similar. So one up on the top shelf would be very similar to the one in the third shelf down in the corner there. See? So if you look up there and then you look over there, same maker, And once they find something that works, something that sells, then they keep making those. And most of these owls were made for sale. But the question that was posited was, what was the intent of the owls? And so these older owls over here, these are from a pueblo called Acoma, which is right on Interstate 40. And these are from Zuni, which is about 35, 40 miles south of Zuni, or of Interstate 40, but kind of off in the weeds. If you break off and you drive, it took us like almost 90 minutes to get there, because it's a very small road. But at Zuni, Zuni and Acoma and the Hopi Pueblos in Arizona are the ones that survived the great wars of the 1300s and 1400s. And mostly those wars were Pueblo on Pueblo.
Yeah, I was going to say who were fighting who at that point. So it's like a tribe on same tribes basically.
Well, it gets very complicated because there's what we call tribes today, but each tribe is made up of clans, and the clans are more loyal to each other than they are to the place where they're living at that moment. So the Hopi Tewa, for example, are much more affiliated with Corn Clan, which is along the Rio Grande River by Santa Fe, than they are with the Hopi people, which are right there in north central Arizona.
And what were the battles for? Land and resources, or just because?
We're still trying to figure that out.
Oh yeah, because I was just like, there was plenty of land. It's just potentially waterways and resources potentially.
Well, waterways were really important because, especially during the droughts, there was a great drought from like 1380 in that range to about 1400, and there were several smaller droughts. But there was a lot of climate change that was happening, and so the drainages were very important. But you have to step past that, and you have to say, okay, there were also conflicts over religion. In the 1300s, well, starting in about the 1100s. Yeah, starting in the 1100s, the Katsina cult started developing. And it apparently started south Arizona near the Texas border in a valley called the Mimbres Valley. And then it spread from the Mimbres Valley across the desert below what's called the Mogollon Rim. Now the Mogollon Rim in Arizona, if you're in Arizona or parts of western New Mexico, there's mountains and then there's desert. And it kind of, this rim goes like east-west across, and it's the drop-off where it goes from the montane environment down to an actual super arid desert environment. And within those, there were different tribal groups, and so the Salado, who made this pottery that had the blackened interiors, the Salado lived up and down, and apparently the uphill, the mountain Salado and the downhill Salado didn't really like each other, and apparently there was a lot of conflict there, and then it spread to other places. But part of the problem is that the nations that survived, maybe for good reason, don't want anybody poking and prodding into what and why and where it happened. So the Acoma and the Zuni and the Hopi, who all managed to survive all of this crap, by definition had to be the baddest asses in town.
So is the pottery black because in that region they could actually get the dyes for that color, or is it just just
No, there's a whole bunch of different reasons. Now this has been carbonized. Okay, but as we go, like that pottery that's down there on that shelf unit down there, that's a whole different thing. That's a chemical process where you fire the pottery to a certain moment in time where it's hardened, but then you smother the fire so it creates an environment where there's no oxygen. And within that reducing environment, the pottery, which is all red, it's all done with red clay, hematite clay.
So it absorbs all the carbons.
No,
Oh, interesting.
no, it actually transforms chemically.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, it was an assumption for the longest time that there was a carbon intake, but it is not a carbon intake. It's actually a change in the hematite clay.
Wow, okay. So it's that, wow. So
Yeah.
So they actually, yeah, I guess you're right, because the heat will remove the oxygen, and by suffocating it, yeah, that's actually, they probably figured it out by just shutting it and leaving something in accidentally, I'm guessing. That'd be interesting to learn how they
Well,
figured that out.
there's actually some black pottery from the 13, 14, 1500s, mostly from northern Mexico. It's called Ramos Black. And Ramos Black was the first black pottery in the Southwest. This is carbonized.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, the Ramos Black, though, they managed to figure out a way to actually turn red clay black, and in that reducing flame environment. That's pretty interesting to me. But the Santa Clara and San Ildefonso, I mean, they fire jars this big and turn them from red to black. That's a hell of a trick. And that's why jars like that bring $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a piece. You know, what you're looking at up here is in excess of $10 million. So there's a lot of potteries here. No, I have a lot of, fairly common, pedestrian, not very expensive potteries. And then I got some real kick-ass pieces. This, for example, is a piece from Jemez Pueblo, which does not make a lot of pottery, but it's one of the only surviving pieces, there may be 5 in the world, from the early 1600s. And so as you go around here, you're seeing a lot of things like this Tsuke figure right here is the only Tsuke figure of this size extant.
Have you had museum curators come in and
Yeah.
take a look?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Well, see, the difference between my museum and public museums is that at public museums, they're really trying to raise money. That's their main goal.
Yeah.
And so they'll take maybe 30 or 40 pieces like this, and they'll put them on plinths. Okay, little stands, and then they'll put their little lights shining on them, and then they'll say, "Oh gosh, wowsies, we've got this." In the meantime, aside from the 30 or 40 or 50 that they put out on display, everything else is in the back room or in the basement. I've been in back rooms and basements at different public institutions, and they usually have fairly nice collections. But their collections in total might be the equivalent of what's in this room. Okay, I got a lot more than that. Let's go over here to the main room. Now out there, things were mostly separated by genre. Here, they're separated by place. So, for example, over here on this wall, this tan pottery is from Hopi, which is in north central Arizona. The black and then the polychrome pottery that's over here is all from San Ildefonso. And then there's mixtures. This is another 1600 pot. These are all, well, for the most part, South American and Mesoamerican. These are new arrivals that just came in. These are various, we don't call the people that were here prior to conquest, we don't call them Anasazi anymore, we call them Proto-Puebloan, because almost all of the Pueblo nations can point to certain types of ceramics, and they can say, okay, that was something from our clan. For example, this great big piece here that's been restored, that's an Ogie-Pogie polychrome. It was made about 1700, and it's been identified by people from the San Ildefonso group as having been made by someone from their clans. I have people from the Pueblo nations that come here all the time because nothing like this exists in New Mexico. So if they want to see pottery that's been made by their family, their great-great-grandmother or whatever, they can't. There is no public institution. And part of that is because the Pueblos themselves don't get along. And so it's sort of like the Hatfields and the McCoys. They're always jostling for, whose grandmother gets the best placement on the shelf or whatever. I'm 400 miles from Santa Fe, the epicenter of the Pueblo world, and I don't have to listen to any of their bullshit. So I can go out there and I can collect everyone and treat everyone fairly and try to not raise one group above another group. And I couldn't do that in Santa Fe. I would have people coming in and bitching me out every day. And in point of fact, we're probably going to be moving the museum at some point. As you can see, I'm running out of room here. And I can still add, if I squeeze real hard, I can still add about another 30 showcases. I've got that wall that's storage over on the far side there. And the problem is that there's no American showcase manufacturers left. All of the showcases are made in China, and they're shipped here as kits. So they have to, you get them, you get all the glass, you get all the frame, you get your base, and you have to put it together yourself. And we were planning to do a container with 50 showcases because we need more downstairs. But this whole thing with the Chinese tariffs blew that all to hell. So I don't know when and where and how we're going to do things. But the basic premise is that all of these pieces are going to be scanned. There's a new scanning technology where you can take a piece and you put it on what's basically a Lazy Susan type of a thing where it rotates, and it's called Scaniverse, and you can do a 3D scan where you can actually go inside the jar and you can go under the jar, because what you do is you use clear plexiglass, and that way you can scan a three-dimensional image. Well, what that allows is if you've got a researcher, for example, in the Baja California, and they're trying to study the potteries that are from that southwest, extreme southwest area, from Phoenix, Tucson, and then over to the west. That's called the Patayan culture. I don't have much of that, but if they were looking for what I have, they could pull that up in the database. And so the last years of my life will not be spent with mile high climates. They'll be spent with taking all that I've acquired of these potteries and making them available to researchers around the world. Because that in and of itself, I mean, think about scanning 12,000 pieces, but actually I have more than 12,000 pieces because, these are Katsina figures, carvings, but in those tubs over there is a collection that was given to me in trust, basically. They sold it to me, but they sold it to me for chump change. It's 4,000 pieces of Nairino. They're mostly stone artifacts, but they were the people that that Columbus met and enslaved and basically exterminated by 1550.
On Hispaniola?
Pardon me?
On Hispaniola? Those Indians?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember names.
Naino.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And they were in Hispaniola. They were most of Cuba, about 2/3 of the way across Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, and then going down the Antilles about halfway. And then they ran into the Caribs and the Caribs were real badasses. So everybody stayed away from them.
What have you derived from the collection? What have you learned kind of amassing so much about the history of this continent?
It's a little difficult to put into words. My collecting of these, I mean, everything that I've said to you guys up to this point has been on the basis of objects, on the basis of what I'm assuming is your perspective in looking at this. I mean, you're seeing this as history, but you're also seeing it as collectibles, as art. Okay, but for the Pueblo people, and this is where it gets really weird, they consider their potteries to actually be an extension of themselves. So they consider their potteries to be their children. It's not unusual at all for Pueblo potters to speak to their pottery. And in order for me to be a guardian of this many offspring, I've had to treat this as an orphanage and a family, and I have to talk to my potteries. I have to feed them. You'll see if you when you're looking at the shelves, you'll see little bits of white corn, which is sacred. I drove all the way to Zuni to get it, and I put white corn out for all of my pots because you have to feed the spirits of the pots. And what gets really strange is that the pots themselves tether the people who made them to this plane of existence. And so it's way more spiritual than any other kind of collecting, and it involves a dedication where you guys have probably seen pictures at one time or another of my Avanyus that are the two that you walked past when you went up the stairs are actually the same two that are on my arms, and they represent the summer corn and winter corn. At the Pueblos, they divide the governance of the Pueblo pretty much by the equinoxes, so the spring and fall equinox. So you have summer corn, which is basically a farming community, rules the Pueblo from March through September, and then the winter corn, which is a hunt and warrior society, they control the Pueblos during the fall and winter months.
The prehistoric Indians that lived in the southwest area here, many of them in the prehistory were, I guess, mound cultures. Have you heard much of the history of that?
Of which cultures?
Mound cultures.
That's not here.
Well, it's found in primarily, I guess, in the Midwest.
Yeah.
There is, but there's evidence in this region as well, as I understand it.
No.
No?
No. There were Mesoamerican influences that were particularly in the Phoenix area.
Mm-hmm.
That was a group that was distinct from what we would have called the Anasazi and the Mogollon. In the Phoenix area, which are today, the descendants of those people are the Tohono O'odham, and they were called the Hohokam by the scientists, and their main city, it really was a city, was Casa Grande, Arizona, and it was the largest settlement north of the Sonoran Desert, and it had approximately 50,000 people that lived in it. Okay, and so down there, they actually had pyramid temples, and they had ball courts, and they have found some ball courts extended up into down the desert area down below the Mogollon Rim. They have found evidence that there were some areas that had been mounded up, but they weren't mounded up like they were at Cahokia. They were mounded up for an entirely different reason, and that was to engage in these games. One of the things that you learn about people that lived in the pre-conquest times were that they gambled a lot. And gambling seems to have been just pandemic among them. To this day, you find pieces of pottery that have been rounded into basically poker chips. And they were using those as tiles in games that they were playing. And it makes it really interesting. But, you know, at the end of the day, there were no mounds, there were no ball courts, and there were no pyramids that were above the Mogollon Rim. So nothing along the I-40 corridor, nothing north of there up into Santa Fe, anything like that, Mesa Verde, or even eastern Utah, nothing. I think the closest ones are in like eastern Kansas.
Or going to the Mississippi Basin.
Well, yeah. The Mississippi Basin, they still go. This pottery over here is all that Mississippi, North Arkansas, or South Arkansas, North Texas pottery that's over here, and but those are all reproductions. There are ones that were dug out of mounds, a lot of them, but most of them are in museums. Yeah. So there was a lot of trade, and the biggest trade was macaws. Rainbirds were sacred to the Pueblos, and they relied upon them for rain. And just to give you an idea, Chaco Canyon, which is a major ancestral site, which is south of Farmington, when the rains failed, there was evidence that at Chaco they had an elite that controlled resources, and so you had these giant adobe structures, stone structures actually, with adobe plastering, but they would store food there. But they used this food as a means of controlling communities. And there was a period of time from 1100 to actually a little earlier, 1000 to 1300, which is called Pax Chaco. And during Pax Chaco, there were isolated incidents of extreme violence, but they seem to have been ritualized. So it wasn't just like war. It was like somebody getting their ass kicked because they didn't do something they were supposed to do. And the theory is that this emanated out of the Chaco elites. In the late 1200s, the big droughts began, and Chaco also suffered from, have you guys noticed with climate change that we get more of these just gullywomper thunderstorms? They had that in the 12 and 1300s also, and it did a thing called canyon cutting. And the reason why that's important is because most of the corn that was being planted by the Proto-Puebloan people was being planted in the alluvial plains of these sort of meandering streams and rivers, but mostly streams. And so around the year, at the time of Christ, the Southwest had forests, and all through the desert areas, there may have been dry periods, but there was also a great deal of vegetation and quite a bit of rain. But that's because the glaciers were up north, and they were pushing that moisture southward. As the glaciers receded back up into Canada, the moisture followed them, and so the whole Southwest area started to dry out. Well, as it dried out, they also started getting these big afternoon thunderstorms, And what had been these meandering little floodplains that they could plant corn in got washed away. And you end up with, if you drive through the Southwest today, you see these little canyons and arroyos. Those used to all be filled with sand. And there's a really cool thing about the Proto-Puebloan corn. Corn, if you guys have ever grown sweet corn, or if you've ever been on a farm in the Midwest, the corn that we grow commercially today has a mat of roots, and it's all tangled, and that holds the corn into the soil. Puebloan corn had a taproot like an oak tree, and it went straight down, and it could hit water 3 feet deep.
That's what I understood. Is it could be covered by sand, but it would still grow.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so to this day, the Hopis still farm up north, up by Black Mesa. They live on the mesa for protection, but they walk down the hill and they plant in the alluvial plains down below. And what they do is they plant like 6 or 8 plants in a clump, and then they leave a space, and then they do 6 or 8 plants in a clump, and so on. But all of the corn seed that they're using is still ancestral. And so it goes down up to 3 feet into the ground. When I learned that, I was like, wow, that was you find these things out. Yeah. Well, they're amazingly adept. One of the things that I just learned in south of Flagstaff, there's a beautiful, huge valley that's below the rim, but not much. I mean, it's like kind of on the side of the rim, called the Verde Valley. And it's basically where Prescott is, in that area. And in the Verde Valley, they were growing immense amounts of cotton. And so we know from history that the primary food groups for the Puebloan people were corn, beans, and squash. Those were the 3 sisters. But when they studied scat, coprolites, human poop, and they analyzed the enzymes in there, they found that 27% of their protein intake was coming from cottonseed. They were growing cotton in the Verde Valley. They were obviously turning it into fabric, but they were toasting the seeds, which we currently harvest and sell as animal feed. And it's when you're buying chicken feed, and it's like a mix of different grains, and it's 16% protein, and you want to move it up so your hens are producing more eggs, and you want to move it up to 20% protein. The way the millers do it is they sneak in cottonseed meal, because cottonseed meal is almost 30% protein. And so this was one of the adaptations that they were doing. But they were doing that with things like redroot pigweed, which is related to amaranth, and they were harvesting those seeds. The Proto-Puebloans were unbelievably clever about utilizing native resources. So, but here, I've been talking. I want you guys to just walk down the aisles, watch your feet, okay? But walk down the aisles and then ask me questions, because I can go on for days. I am one of the foremost experts on this in the world. So I can give you more than you want to hear. But go, walk.
How long have you been, when did you start collecting?
97. One of the things that also makes my collection very different from what you'll see in museums is that museums are looking for big pieces that they can put up on those plinths. Okay? I'm looking for cool shit. Okay? So I actually, for the longest time, wasn't buying any big pieces at all. I was looking for things, especially things that are almost comic book-like, things that are effigies, that are anthropomorphic, things that are just really, really interesting, and then combine that with sort of quirky and in some instances religious based.
What are the telltale characteristics of pottery that kind of give you an idea of more or less the age of the work that you're working with?
That depends by every photo. Every photo has a different set of
So
characteristics.
isn't that sort of universal? Is that
These little guys are cool.
I guess the culture essentially where everything is
No, they're not one culture.
I mean, look at these things. These back here, those are really cool.
No. No, they all invented the wheel for themselves. They all think they do the best pottery. They all think
Yeah.
people in the next valley do shit. Okay,
Stegosaurus.
they do their own thing, and they think the lady in the house next door produces
How
crap.
about this?
And so there is no universal criteria of any kind. About the only thing I can say that almost all of them do is they harvest clay, they pray, and they create coils in order to create their pottery. So they'll take clay and they clean it and they bless it, and then they get it to a certain degree of moistness, and then they start rolling it into coils, and then they hand coil. Yeah, they're all hand coiled. Yeah, except that may not have been coiled. Here's the crazy part. They did that because it helped keep water cooler. Okay, you know a radiator? Radiator has baffling. And the baffling increases the surface area and thus increases the ability of that unit to cool the water that's going through it. Well, they, that is probably Magion, or maybe Membrace, and they will sometimes create slabs, put them together, and then use what's called a paddle and anvil, where they put a piece inside and then they whack it. But then they go back through and spindle it like that. And so my assumption for years was that all ancestral corrugated pottery like that, what you were looking at were the coils. Oh, hell no. No, that's the thing, is you can't assume anything. You can learn real quickly that, no, that's not what they did. They actually, there were people who could use like a stick, and they would cut it to a certain form, and then they would go around top. And apparently, I know people who are reenactors, and they say it's harder than hell to do corrugated pottery. It really requires a steady hand and a lot of patience.
kind of goes back to the original writing.
Yeah, it's like the monks sitting up there in their abbeys and trying to illustrate, their text. Yeah.
You know, this is a concept question. In the photo cultures, many of them, I'm sure they learn essentially trade, especially in the scientific trade, where they somehow they believe that or is it in the trade that was going from the southwest or
No, they were in the trade as much as anybody. I'll tell you a funny story though. Right on I-25, there is a woman, Pecos Pueblo, which actually operated until about 1840, and then they finally had to shut it down because Comanche were raiding them. But Pecos Pueblo supposedly had a rule that they would trade with everybody, but the people from the Rio Grande Pueblo were never allowed within the perimeter wall. The Comanche were, the Apache were, but the Tewas were not. And I've got to confirm this. I read it in a book that I bought from the National Park Service. So that gives me some credence, okay? But I want to see it in the second place. But apparently the Tewas were not really well liked. A lot of people have this impression of Pueblo people as being these gentle farmers and weavers pictures of these beautiful blankets. Let me tell you about their scalp society, okay? There's more to the picture than appears on the surface.
Yeah, those are the headlines that grab your attention into the cultures initially.
Yeah.
And then from there, yeah.
Yeah, well, as you learn stuff, you're like, oh my goodness, this is a little bit more complex than I thought. I'll give you an example. Right here is Zuni Pueblo, and on the floor back over here, I have some artifacts that were from Zuni ruins. We know they're Zuni ruins. They readily own up to the fact that they're Zuni ruins. And I've offered to return artifacts that were excavated on private land, private ranches, where it's completely legal to this day to dig. Okay? I got some from a private ranch, and I got a hold of my friends at Zuni, including the head of one of the clans, and I said, hey, I have some artifacts that are from your clan, and they came from this spot. And she said to me, all the clan heads at Zuni are female. She said to me, they won't let us take them back. And I said, why? And they said, well, we don't know the circumstances under which that pueblo was abandoned. The people could have been killed, but it also could have been burned for witchcraft. And they are really, really, really into the whole concept of there being positive and negative energies. And since they don't know why that ruin was abandoned, they don't want to risk infecting the main pueblo with any bad juju that could come from those artifacts. And so they say, hey Chuck, why don't you just keep them? It's like, okay, bitch, I will. But I'm telling you, nothing is as simple as you think it is.
Oh, no.
There's shit they don't tell you, and I'm in as deep as any white boy, okay? And I'm just telling you that I was at a funeral. I'm the only person, Anglo person, ever invited to a Taylor funeral, okay, that I know of. And it's a 4-day ceremony. And after a day and a half of feasting with the governor, the lieutenant governor, the sheriff, and the cacique, I said, you know, I think I hear my mother calling. I'm going to go back to Old Bear and get away from this shit, because this is spoofing me out.
Yeah, a lot of this pottery is
Some of it. But that gets really tricky.
Thank you very much.
Okay, for sure. Thanks for coming by. See ya. Right over there's some pots. Go all the way over where that bird drum is right there. See where the bird is on the drum? Yeah. Now, look right above that, and you'll see some long things that look like birds.
Right.
I recently found out that south of the Magillon, or south of the rim, in the desert out there, they sometimes did not bury people. They did cremations. And then they would use those pots like that to hold cremated remains. And I only learned that about 3 months ago.
Well, I heard a story similar they buried their ancestors in the land underneath them.
Oh yeah.
And they would bury them with similar objects. I don't know if they contain ashes or not. I'm not certain about that. But I know they would put food items and bitter pests and other things with them.
Egyptians too, right?
The Egyptians practiced the same.
jars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They didn't mummify necessarily. That people did.
No, but I
Well,
mean, the Pinocchio jars where they put
Yeah.
diamonds in their stuff, bury them up.
Where they buried in houses was primarily in West Mexico, in Colima, Nayarit, and what's the other one? Colima, Jalisco. Okay, over there along the coast, they would do what are called shaft tombs. And I don't know if they built the house over it, or if they dug it in the house itself.
Well, from what I read and understood in itself, it was essentially, yeah, the families were very literally interned underneath the creek, underneath the shore. So they would get, so the family would always be close and right over them.
Yeah. Well, the Pueblos did that too. The Pueblos would bury people in rooms. And they also, strangely enough, would bury them in what we would call their landfills. They would bury people in what are called middens. And this makes things really, really weird because under the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act that was put into place by Congress, archaeologists and everyone else, even if it's on private land, are forbidden to do anything as regards a funeral. So if you're digging in a midden pile, trying to do stratification to figure out how for example, how the food sources evolved over a period of time. So if you have a 600-year-old Pueblo, the bottom of the midden pile will give you an idea of what they were eating then, and then the top of the midden pile will give you an idea of just before abandonment what they were doing. But here you are, you're digging through, you're doing your stratification layers, and then all of a sudden you run into the skeleton. You're shit out of luck. You have to stop by law.
It's pretty fascinating. I was thinking about another article that read once talking about a prehistoric trade network that used to occur between the Mississippi Valley peoples all the way to the Midwest, at least up to Peoria.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and eventually.
Oh, no, it went all the way to
Much further, right?
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Because, and I'll show you,
Yeah.
I just got, these are, I believe, Mesoamerican. These are copper. And these were part of a cloak. They were attached. Or Arizona copper. We don't know because it was naturally occurring copper. But I got these 5. They're the only ones in the world. But yeah, but I'll show you some trade copper that I just got these also from the same auction house. So I'm presuming they came from the same collection. These are, they will trade them, these are knives that were used for cutting like buffalo or elk. And they're fairly sharp, but it's the only metal that they had. And these are rare. You're going to drive the wheels off your truck before you see
Anything like this. That's very true. I've seen them in photographs, I've seen them in ornamentation.
Yeah, these are the real.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's probably 800-year patina on these. Is that cool shit or what?
I never expected to see that.
Yeah, I have muchas cool shit. I mean, like, when I say I have thousands of pieces, like these here, those two there, that scoop and that plate, are Hohokam. There was a little figure down here that was Hohokam also. That one right there is probably beautiful Hohokam. I gotta clean it up. But these are all proto-Hopi here.
That's amazing.
Well, the real Kachinas are behind you. There's. I'll show you a Kachina. Look at this. This will knock your socks off. They're all cool. And this one, okay, cute little effigy bowl. See here, vertical. Neat little effigy. That, yeah, takes you out. It's actually. Yeah, and this was used in sacred ceremony. Yeah. Muchas gracias. These are from Colombia. Yeah, they're from the Amazonas side of the Colombian. Well, here, come over and look at the other room. You want to see the other room?
Yeah, there's another room besides these?
Yeah. Come on over.
It's hard to believe it. Keep going. That's how you make your
Get your knee pads. My teacher was there, and so I filled this room. I created a circle of Santa Clara pottery so that the village is always with me, even when I'm not there. And so these are all the grandmas, up to modern, but I don't buy that much modern pottery. I mostly buy pottery from 1950, 1960, back to about 1880. So that's sort of the time period.
Some of the pop culture stuff is sort of interesting. TIE Fighter, the iPod.
Well, that was the TIE fighter over there. That's my friend Gilbert Sanchez, and he's awesome. But man, he's whack job. Yeah. This was my friend Eddie who made these, and Eddie died the year after I started getting seriously into potteries. Eddie was killed by a drunk driver, but he made these Star Wars figures. That's all he ever made. That's the entirety. I gave his parents one piece because they didn't have any of his figures after he died. But Eddie gave me those.
What's the significance of the arrowhead on the back of some of the animals? Is that just I mean, you have some in there.
Oh, those are spirit pack, yeah, and usually that's a thanks to the hunter who killed him.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't know if it was part of the story of the beast or just thanks to I wasn't sure. So.
Well, I knew the guy that made those two there that have the feathers on them and the spirit
There's some
packs.
in there too. Yeah.
Yeah, but one of the things that I've learned is that there's just questions you don't ask. You mind your own business, because the Pueblos, the Spanish tried to eradicate their spirituality, their religions, by actually burning them alive. They had the Inquisition that first came to Mexico City because they were hunting for closeted Jews. When the Spanish crown under Ferdinand and Isabella finally conquered all of Spain as we know it today, Jews were forced to emigrate. And a lot of them ended up taking on Spanish names and hiding themselves in the colonies. And so they sent the inquisitors to Mexico City, and one of the reports that I read, which was from a Jewish group that has studied this, said that they had one day where they had 100 Jewish people that were burned alive in Mexico City for refusing to convert to Christianity. And so then they sent the inquisitors almost as a afterthought to the Pueblos, but they tried to eradicate the Pueblo religion there. And it led to the Pueblo Revolt of 1680. In 1680, the Pueblos killed all the priests. They killed everyone who had been oppressing them, and they drove the Spanish out of the American Southwest. The Spanish went all the way down to El Paso, Texas, and the survivors. And then they had to stop because the governor of Mexico would not let the colonists return to Mexico. He said, you signed on to colonize the north region, and you have to stay. And so they stayed there for 12 years, and then in 1692, they went back into New Mexico and struck deals. And a lot of those deals involved leaving the Pueblos alone as regards their religion. So that was sort of the great compromise. But then the Americans came in 1846 through 1848, took over the whole area, and immediately the Methodists and the Presbyterians and everybody else started showing up and trying to convert everybody. And so the Pueblos are super sensitive about their religion. And they don't want us to butt in. And so I've just learned the hard way to shut the fuck up and just don't ask questions. And if I don't know something specifically, if somebody tells me, bueno. But if they don't actually, like, you know, put it out there, don't ask. Just, the reason why I've gotten very close with the Pueblo people is because they know I don't pry. And that's why I was invited to my friend Eloy's funeral, when it really was a breach of protocol for me to be there. And that's why I didn't stay. I stayed about a day and a half, and I just said, no, I can feel this is not right, because the family was very happy that I was there, but I could feel it from other members of the community that I really was an intruder, and and I just got out of Dodge.
Yeah, you can feel that just in lots of places where you just figure out like, okay, this is just a lot.
I walked into wrong bars a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because because it's like it could be a religious reason for something being created. It could be something that was just, this is how they wrapped it up or summed up some sort of in a bow and just left it. You know? No?
With the Pueblos, everything is religious.
Oh, it's all real. Okay.
You have never met a group of people that are so involved in ritual. Everything they do from the minute they wake up, their whole day is engaged in ritual of one kind or another.
So protection of religion, protection of spirituality, protection of
protection of the community. But the problem is then within the community, they are the Bickersons. I mean, they just fight and squabble like you wouldn't believe. And you know, the whole witchcraft thing is a big damn deal. You know, if you don't like somebody, you accuse them of being a witch, and it's you know, Salem all over again.
Oh yeah, no, it's like
history. It's weird down there.
History repeats itself. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm here. I ain't there because I just don't want to get involved in any of that crap. I like the material objects, but more importantly, for me, this is a mission. Okay, I could have long ago retired off the money that I've spent on this pottery, but long after Mile High Comics is gone, no one's ever going to remember me for having been a comic book dealer. And I've been an exemplary comic book dealer. I've definitely been at the top of my class. But this group of objects is the only accumulation like this in the world. The Smithsonian does not have anything approaching this. They have a great collection because they have the Hay collection, which was accumulated in the late 1800s and early 1900s. But the trouble is their collection cuts off, and there's not a lot that they have after 1930. And so this collection has some similar pieces to what they have, but then it has everything going forward. And a lot more interesting things like the Star Wars figures and stuff like that. And the thing to realize is that every single piece it's like in comics, okay? Where you are buying original art, every piece of original art is unique. You know, an artist might draw Conan, you know, similarly, but if you're getting, you know, a John Buscema Conan piece inked by Alfredo Alcala, there may be similarities between pieces, but each piece stands on its own. Well, it's the same thing with Pueblo pottery. These are all bears that were made by my friend Eloy. But each and every one of them has its own personality and is different in their own way. And I watched Eloy making these, and it really made a big difference in my life. So this is, ideal. I buy these as a collectibles dealer, and I have that eye, but none of it would mean anything if the spirituality weren't behind it. And so, and I'll give you one example. At the Pueblos, none of them are allowed to do what I've done. Putting sacred abanus on you is to give yourself over to them. It's sort of like putting a pentagram on your chest and giving yourself over to Satan. And I'm not saying that abanus are bad, but I'm saying that they're deities. Okay, and they represent all the energy in the universe, and I have 11 of them over my body. No. Eloy, who was a member of the Medicine Society, told me that I had to put a bear on my chest to protect me from my own abanus. They're very, very powerful, and he said I needed to have balance between my energy and my strength and the strength of the abanus, and then I could channel their energy as a part of my energy. And so it gets very, very complicated. But if somebody says something to you, you do not ignore it. They say it to you for a reason, and you have to be very respectful, and you have to realize that what seems relatively cut and dried can have ramifications that go far beyond anything that you ever would have believed. By the way, these abanus exist over here on these potteries. That's all pottery by Van Gutierrez, and I received permission from his daughter to incorporate his abanus into my personal prayer, and I'm the first and only person that's ever been done for. But for the Pueblos, I know of two Pueblo people that have abanu tattoos, and they were both the sons of the medicine man from San Ildefonso Pueblo, and he's probably the single most powerful person in the Pueblo. So he gave his sons permission to put them on, but they had to put them on up on their upper forearm, because when they do their dances, their annual feast day dances, and then the intervening dances, they wear spruce bows as armbands, and so that way it would cover up the abanus. But when I go there, I mean, it's weird, because they, there's not everybody knows that I received permission. So some people think that I did cultural appropriation, when in point of fact, I went through a whole long process in order to do this. And I received permission from multiple people in positions of power.
Certainly assisting in the preservation of cultures that are losing their voice.
Well, yeah. It gets very, very complicated, because you don't want to end up being the white savior. Okay, and that's another whole sort of head trip that you got to be real careful about. I really prefer looking at it as an orphanage, looking at it as my bringing together the objects that want to come to me. And that's really important, because I bid in auctions, and I go to shows, and I have private individuals contact me, and I would say that 80 to 90% of the pieces that I look at, the deals fall apart. So my spiritual belief is that the pieces of pottery that are here all want to be here. Otherwise, they would not have come. Because it's an incredible journey across space and time. I mean, these pieces here are all 100 to 150 years old, these three right here. And they had to survive that and go through. I mean, think about all the things that can happen to a ceramic object in a 100-year span. things happen. And so, you have to just sort of bear that in mind, that if it's here, if it traveled across space and time from the maker through God knows how many different hands to finally end up resting here, I believe that there's volition involved, that it's not by happenstance that piece came to me. And that makes it way different than comics. I mean, you're down there.
It's the idea of every decision everybody has made, not just you, but everybody has made, has led it to be where it is. Not,
Right.
So earth, wind, fire, everything has led it still to exist and to be here, right?
Right. So, you look at that corrugated jar up on the top shelf up there, that is a minimum of 700 years old. And here it is.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
There had to be a reason. And so, that's kind of it.
It's also the same thing. You look at. You can take the same methodology and think about some of the art that you have downstairs. And it's like, for some of that to survive as long as it has.
Sure.
It's a whole different type of story, but it's just sort of interesting how, if you step back, everything that has ever transpired in your life and everybody's life before that, and thousands of years before that, has led it
Oh,
to
absolutely.
exist.
I am not long on stature, okay? But where I came from, being able to slide into a foxhole was real handy, okay? And so there's certain characteristics where you look at them, and then I have what are called epicanthic eye folds. And I had genetic testing done, and a part of my heritage is Scythian. And they were the badasses that rode the little ponies out there on the plains that eventually evolved into Genghis Khan and the Mongols and all of that. But somewhere along the line, the little blonde-haired chicks in central Germany, where I came from, must have come across one of those cute horse boys. And that's the way it goes. And so here I am. So yeah, that fits right in with what you're saying.
Yeah, I love that art too. And that the warrior-ish or whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty cool.
well, this is truly an amazing collection. Can I get your name for the
Sure.
video?
My name is Chuck Rozanski, and I own Mile High Comics, and this actually is the Pueblo Treasures Museum.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you very much for showing us this and allowing us in here today.
Absolutely.
All right.